Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Sharon for inviting me here to speak to you this morning. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a senior statistician with the Central Statistics Office with responsibility for the census. The census provides us with a wide and deep kind of fountain of data about Ireland and what it looks like with regards to who we are from a point of view of age, our marital status, our households and families, how we work, how we travel, our level of education, our health, our disability. So the last census was last year, and hopefully all of you filled out your census forms, and they're all now sitting in a warehouse just a couple of kilometres from here in Swords, County Dublin. And we took 6 months to scan and capture the data off those forms. And the data I'm going to show you today is based on last year's census. So we released the first set of results on the 6th of April this year. So a lot of you will have seen that. It got a lot of media attention. And then we released the next set of results on housing. And of course, that got even more attention because it is so important. So today I'm going to focus on some aspects of the older population. But even as I begin, I'm not sure how or what the age cutoff point is for the older population. So it's always traditionally been 65 because that's the age people retired. But I'm not sure how relevant 65 is anymore. And, you know, maybe across all our statistical systems, we'll have to start thinking about 68 or 70 and then move it on up to 70 and 75. And just as a bit of a joke in the office, we sometimes use symbols when we're producing statistics. So we might have a little picture of a baby or, you know, if we're talking about births. And so we had a little symbol of a person with a walking stick to represent those aged 65 and over. And I said, absolutely not. I'll have somebody who's come in from hiking a mountain and they'll see this report and they'll ring me up and they'll go get rid of that. So we did. So without further ado, so this just to give you a flavour of how the population of Ireland has changed since 1841. So it peaked at 6.53 million back in 1841, or I should say that's as far back as the census data goes. And then, of course, it fell dramatically as a consequence of the famine and outward migration. And it reached a low point in 1961 of 2.8 million, and then it has increased steadily thereafter, but there was a period in the 80s there where we also had a small fall in our population, and the most recent census figures now tell us that the population of Ireland is 4.76 million. This is a population pyramid for Ireland, and as you'll see straight away, it's not actually a pyramid at all. So what you're looking at there is Ireland experienced a period of a high net inward migration at the end of the 70s, and that led to a peak in births back in the early 1980s, and they're today's 32, 33, 34, 35-year-olds, and that's what you're looking at there in that bulk in that graph. And then we've had a baby boom, you know, which is coming to an end now, but Ireland went through a baby boom over the last 10 years as well. So to put that in context, back in 1981, I think it was in the region of 75,000 babies were born. And in 1994, which is the in bit there in that graph, the C shape, only 50,000 babies were born. So it's the difference of 25,000 children, and that presents huge challenges in terms of, particularly at the younger ages, in terms of schools and all of those pressures on our maternity services, etc. So what you'll see now is that bulk of people aged 30, of course, they'll all age together and the graph will move forward, and then that set of children will all have to feed through the school system. And so Ireland's population pyramid will continue to have this shape if in your mind you could roll that forward. So when you're looking at Ireland and looking at our population and who we are, it's kind of useful to keep this kind of shape in mind as to how our population structure looks. So I did use 65 and over to talk about the older population, but of course census statistics, and the beauty of them is that they're available by single year of age. So when the experts and the professionals who look at this from a care point of view need more data, it's all on the CSO website, and they can go in and look at single year of age by county, by electoral division, etc. So these are just headline figures for you. So between 2011 and 2016, because the census is every 5 years, the population aged 65 and over increased by just over 100,000, or 19% over those 5 years. And to put that in context, the population of Ireland increased by 3.8%. So 5 times the increase in the older population. So it increased from 535,000 to 638,000 over those 5 years. If I take the single year of 69 years of age, they had the largest increase, where we saw an increase of 10,000 persons in just that one age bracket alone. And those aged 100 and over, the census enumerated 389 people in 2011 and just over 450 people in 2016. But the gap is narrowing between males and females, so we saw a larger increase in the older male population than in the older female population. So once you get to age 65, there are more women than men. Women live longer than men, and you'll see that when I come on to talk about projections and mortality. But in 2016, the male population increased by 53,000, or 22%, while the female population increased by 16.7%. So the male population is now 296,000. Men aged 85 and over in 2016 accounted for 23,000 persons, compared with 18,500 5 years earlier, an increase of 4,500. So the gap between men and women is narrowing at the older age groups. The number of females still outnumbered the number of males by some 44,000 in 2016 for this group 65 and over. And I think as we go about our daily lives, we can see that, I feel, when you're out and about, there are more older women than men in Ireland and in society generally. Of the 67,500 persons aged 85 and over, women accounted for 2/3 of those people. And that was an increase of 4,500 on the 2011 figure. So these are important kind of general points to bear in mind when we're looking at the older population. So let's have a look at people aged 65 and over living alone by age group. There's 157,000 people aged 65 and over live alone in Ireland. 97,000, or 62% of these, are women. And you can see on this graph where the males are in the blue on the left and the women are in the pink on the right, the difference is quite stark in the number of men and women, particularly as we go up the age groups. So in the 65 to 69 age bracket, 22,000 women with 18,500 men. And by the time we get to 85 and over, almost 17,000 women and 6,000 men. And these are the people living alone. We do see more women living alone than men. This is the county breakdown of these older people who live alone, 65 and over, in 2016. Dublin City has the largest amount. So in Ireland, when we look at demographics, the youngest population is in the commuter belt counties around Dublin. That's where all the young families are settling and having their children. And we find the older population in our city centres and in the west of Ireland. So in Dublin City, there's just 21,000 older people live alone. In Cork County, 12,800, and then Leitrim and Longford would have the lowest numbers of older people living alone. But you can see from this graph the breadth and depth of information that is available to policymakers when they go to try and understand this problem. All I can give you is a flavour of what's available today, but it will give you some indication of what we're looking at. So this is the county breakdown of those living alone age 65, and now I've added the 80 and over in 2016. In Dublin City, we have 7,400 persons aged 80 and over living alone. I think we'd all be quite proud of ourselves if we're living alone, and my mum's living on her own at that age. Longford, 500 people, Cork County, 4,000, Leitrim, 539. So again, we can take any single year of age and we can look at it by geography, and we can try to get a flavour for who these people are, where they're living, and who's living on their own. And then this just breaks it out, showing those who live with others and those who live alone. And you can see males 65 to 69, 18,500 live alone, and the rest 82,000 live with others. Well, by the time we're looking at females aged 85 and over, 17,000 on their own, and almost 16,000 living with others. In total, 45% are living on their own. This is just what we would call a thematic map, and we often produce maps like this when we produce census statistics because a lot of people find numbers difficult to deal with, and they can be a bit overwhelming. And so this shows the percentage of elderly living alone by county, where the darker counties have the higher percentage. So those darker colours there, the percentage is 26 to 32%, I think, and the paler colours have the lower percentage of people living alone. And so we can see it's a larger problem in the northwest, and then in the cities. Cork City doesn't really stand out there, but it is the darker colour, and as is Dublin City. So the census asks a wide range of questions. So I talked about where we work, how we travel, and one of the questions that was on the 2016 census was whether or not people had a personal computer and whether or not people had access to the internet. And then if they did have access to the internet, what type of internet access they had, be it broadband or dial-up. The question on PC access is probably a bit redundant because most people access the internet on their phones now. So in 2016, there were 395,000 households headed by a person aged 65 and over. And of these, 202,000 indicated that they had broadband access to the internet, so just over 50%. 20,000 indicated they had access other than broadband, while 161,000 indicated they had no internet access. In households headed by persons aged 65 and over, 156,000 were living alone, and among this group, 94,000 had no internet access. So I guess in the context of isolation and the challenges facing people, there's almost 100,000 people living on their own and they don't have internet access. Again, these statistics and this data, so we produce the data in a certain way, but every day people get onto us and they ask us to drill down into the data. So again, we can provide that by single year of age, by type of dwelling, by geography, and all of this data then feeds into policy and planning. We also ask about how people heat their homes. And this, of course, is important not only from an environmental point of view, but also then, of course, in terms of the elderly and how they're heating their homes. So of households headed by a person aged 65 and over, gas, oil and electricity were the main types of fuel used for central heating, accounting for 315,000 households. There were 24,000 households using coal as their main fuel source and 30,000 using peat. A total of almost 8,000 households indicated they had no central heating. So that's households headed by a person aged 65 and over living alone. Housing tenure. Do we own or rent our own home, or who is providing our housing for us? In 2016, again, our 395,000 households, the majority of older households own their home outright, accounting for 320,000 or 81%. So 4 out of 5 older households own their home outright. And that's an increase of 45,000 on 2011. So what about the rest of the people? Of those older households who did not fall into the category of owning their home outright, 23,000 indicated they still had a mortgage, and that's up from 18,000 5 years ago. Now, a lot of people don't retire at 65 anymore, and they do continue to work. But anyway, 23,000 had a mortgage. 9,300 were renting privately, and that's up from 8,500 5 years ago. 23,000 were renting from a local authority, and that's up from 19,000 5 years ago. And 3,500 were renting from a voluntary body. So definitely some food for thought there, I would think, particularly with regards to those renting privately, which might make them or leave them a bit vulnerable. So there are the statistics that I have from the 2016 census. So next Thursday, we're releasing the second tranche of census data, and that will cover the topics of health, disability and caring. And then 2 weeks after that, we release a dedicated report that just looks at the age profile of the population. And so I can't present those numbers today because they haven't been published yet. So for the next slide, I looked back to the 2011 data, because this looks at older people living in communal establishments. So in Ireland, when we do the census, we not only knock on every door in Ireland and hand every private household a census form, we also go to hospitals, nursing homes, prisons, boarding schools, etc., and we ask everybody to fill out a census form. So we have the data on people living in communal establishments. In April, so this is April 2011, the census results show that 94% of the older population, again 65 and over, lived in private households, with the remainder, 31,000, in communal establishments. So a small enough percent, but 31,000 people. Of these, 2/3, or 21,000, were in nursing homes, and that's represented by the pale blue in that graph. And what you're looking at there, with the kind of strange shape on that graph, of course, is the larger number of women as we age, because women live longer, and so there will be more women in nursing homes. The numbers increase with age, particularly from age 70 onwards, rising to a peak of over 1,132 living in nursing homes at age 88, before decreasing in line with the decreasing population. There were 4,900 people indicated that they were living in a hospital in the last census. So I imagine that people have been there, maybe they're waiting for care or waiting for a place, or they can't leave the hospital. And we ask on the census, where do you usually live? And those people indicated that they lived in the hospital. And then the other not stated, there's about 5,000 people in that group, and a lot of those were in religious institutions. The 2011 census also provided data on disability and health, but because the 16 numbers are coming out next week, I didn't include them in this. But just to give you a flavour, so we do ask, do you have a disability, and if that disability causes you problems in your everyday life, and your disability can have to do with breathing or with mobility. It could be a psychological or emotional disability. It could be hearing, blindness, etc. So there's a range of questions there. And in 2011, 1 in 4 people aged 65 and over indicated they had some level of disability. And by the time we get to age 80, that was half of us. And then the census would also have results there on how that disability, or if it impacts on your life. There's also a question on the census on caring, provided unpaid care, and again those results are coming out next week. But people in their 40s, 1 in 10 people will be providing care to a friend or relative who needs it, unpaid. And in females in that age bracket, it's 1 in 8. So women do provide more care than men. And again, there's far more detail available on that type of stuff coming out next week. So what's going to happen into the future? Another product that the CSO produces is population projections, and this is done following every census, and I was responsible for editing the last set of population projections. So how do we do it? Well, what we do is we look at the population as it is today, so we look at it by single year of age, and we ask ourselves, well, what's going to happen with fertility? What has it done in the last 5, 6, 8 years, and how is that trend going to continue on into the future? And we convene an expert group and we make assumptions about the fertility of women, and then we make assumptions about mortality. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then we look at migration and we say, well, what's happened over the last few years and what's likely to happen over the next few years. So the last set of projections we published it in 2013, but we did our work in 2012, and it was a very challenging time to think about migration in particular, because Ireland had experienced a massive wave of inward migration, and it had fallen into negative outward migration in 2012. So what we do then is we come up with different scenarios, and we say, well, if migration does this, this is what the population will be. If it does this, this is what the population will be. And so they're called projection assumptions. So we could have 3 assumptions on migration. So M1, M2, M3. And then on fertility, we'll have a couple of assumptions. And so the figures I'm going to show you today, because what happened was our strongest migration assumption came true in that we returned to inward migration in Ireland, so we're there already, which was the M1. And then on fertility, we had 2 assumptions. So one was that fertility would hold steady at 2.1, and 2.1 is replacement rate for the population, and that's where it had been in about 2011. 12, or that it would slowly fall to 1.8 over the next 30 years, and that would appear to be what's bearing out with regards to our population. With regards to, so that's F2, so the figures I'm going to show you are from a technical point of view, in case you're wondering what it is, M1, F2. Mortality. So what we do is we look at gains in life expectancy over the period. Oh, I do. And you can see here that the largest gains in life expectancy were recorded in the immediate post-war period of 46 to 61. And these gains resulted from improvements in living conditions as well as from advances in maternity services and medical treatments such as immunisation. And the situation has improved again in recent years. Between 1991 and 2010, life expectancy at birth increased from by 5.6 years for males and 4.9 years for females. The improvements have been most notable in older age groups. Improved living conditions coupled with further advances in medical care are considered to be the main contributing factor. So we can see there that between 7 and 10, males had a 1.1 gain and females had a 1.1 gain. But the males are catching up with the women, and we saw that in the most recent census results. So mortality assumptions. When we did the set of projections, we said improvements in life expectancy are assumed to continue for the foreseeable future. Male life expectancy at birth, we said, would increase from 77.9 to 85.1 by 2046, whereas female life expectancy would increase from 82.7 in 2010 to 88.5 by 2046. And then we feed that into our model and we have a look at what comes out. So this looks at the projection of the population aged 65 and over from 2018. This shows right up to 2046. So the results show that the population aged 65 and over is projected to increase from the 637,000, that is what this census is telling us, to 887,000 by 2027. That's only 10 years away, or a gain of 250,000 persons. The 1 million mark is projected to be breached by 2031, and by 2037 the figure is projected to pass the 1.1 million mark. So there will be more older people as the years roll on. If we add the people aged 80 and over into this graph, and I was looking at that and saying, you know, what will I use? I could have said age 78 or age 81, but again, the professionals would tell me, you know, where the trouble begins. And it begins differently for all of us. By the trouble, I mean where we need more assistance in our lives. So I used an age 80. So the population aged 80 and over is projected to increase from just under 150,000 at present to 232,000 in 10 years. So 80,000 more people aged 80 and over in 10 years, and to almost 360,000 by 2037. So over the next 20 years, there will be 200,000 more people aged 80 and over. And this is our future population pyramid. So hidden beneath the red, you can see the blue pyramid that I showed you earlier. And this is what it will look like as the population ages. And so the red bulge there around the 20-year-olds, that's the baby boom we've just had. And then you can see the people getting older and those people in their 40s and 50s aging as we roll the model forward. All of the data, of course, is up on the CSO website. For every single year, we would have the projection, and then by every single year of age. And then we do regional projections as well, so we can see how this distributes itself around the country. So that's it for the moment, and I take it the questions come later then, after you've had a chance to digest that. Thanks for your attention.